welcome to our live board meeting. We are discussing our foundational documents, whatever week that is of this. So we left off last time. Does anyone want to read what we were? Proposals and initiation methodologies, and also if we want to put it on the screen, that would also probably be helpful. I can read this part, but we should probably have it on the screen first, right? And mine doesn't work well for the screen sharing because I can't do the scrolling properly with my current computer. Awesome. So there's this part here. Proposals are initiated when at least 2 PCIC holders are present in an interactive video meeting. Proposals are iterated when at least 2 PCIC holders are present in an interactive video meeting. And then at least 75% of PCIC holders must be present to come to a consensus on a resolution and with no holders blocking. Upon positive resolution, all details of the initiation and iteration are recorded along with the details of the final proposal. Details should include who initiated the proposal, the iterations, and the participated in the resolution. But I think we also said that that sounds like we have to also put in the initiation and the iteration, which makes sense, but that the resolution is the part that we need to record, right? So external jurisdiction. Keep trying to scroll on the document itself instead of the other part.
Right, and should this part here, should that be on who participated in the resolution?
And who participated in the resolution? Yeah, that would make sense. Who participated?
And then instead of interactive video meeting, do we want to say board meeting? Because I mean, theoretically, it could be audio, and I'm not sure that we want to do it outside of the board meeting because if people are trying to follow it, it might be weird to do it in a project, roundtable or something for TogetherTec. It seems like it should be fairly consistent, I think.
And I think this is what we had a 20-minute conversation about last week because I was looking to see if we had homework about, yeah, we can put that in there because it's like we did say you can come up with and iterate anything in any meeting where there's any 2 of us, basically, even 1 of us really, but 2 for this particular, to verbalize it to somebody else. But in order for it to be resolved, you'd have to bring it to a board meeting and say what your initiation is, and then the iteration process anyway, at which time we'd also be doing iterations, and then we would come to a resolution. So I think putting it in the board meeting makes sense, and then we'll just...
Okay, any other thoughts?
Radek, I know you weren't here last week. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, or if you're...
No, it all sounds good. I would one thing I would add to it is when I was reading about other styles of proposals and initiations of proposals, there was something about I think it was in a French AEC, like something to do with energy, very big company, and they tried something non-standard for a while, and they had this system where, as far as I recall, there was no need for the proposal to be initiated in any other way than someone just stating, I want to do this and this, and it would by default go through unless someone objected and said, okay, this is not, good enough, or this is not good in general. But otherwise, proposals did not need any special or other acknowledgement from everyone or voting or anything like that. It was like a speed, a fast track of ideas and fast track of initiations of execution of some proposal, be it a very small one or even very big one. And it will be something like, I am going to do this and this, and unless someone says otherwise, I am just going to do this. So that's one comment, and I don't...
Do we know how that worked for them?
Yes, it worked good.
Okay. Were there any case studies or like how things changed or anything?
One case study I read about was in the book by Frederic Laloux. I quoted it a couple of times before. Reinventing organizations, something like that. And one example was setting up a power plant in some other country, and it was literally very big proposal. And someone just came up with this and said, "Okay, I'm going to allocate this much resources because it was possible," and just build a power plant in other country, and it worked out well. So from very small scale to very big scale, it is possible. Such a way is possible. That's just a comment. I don't mean it to.
Are there any examples of how it changed them though? Because it sounds like companies do that sort. Companies could build power plants in other countries even if you voted on it normally. So I'm not sure what the difference. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just wondering if there was some sort of a hey, we were getting hamstrung up, or we were getting we couldn't pass anything, and then we made this change, and all of a sudden we started seeing good changes coming through.
No, it was a normal way of doing stuff in that company for a while, for a couple of years. And the difference was normally when you in a company, when you propose to allocate 1% of all resources to do something new, what you need is go to the upper management and get approvals and get some people to vote on it and pass the proposal, and the lengthy process of making ideas executable. And the difference is, in case of this company, it was just as simple as, okay, I think it's a good idea, and no one objected. Oh, no, there was some strong objections. I don't remember. But my point was that fast tracking of ideas is also possible, and apparently in some cases it's known to be working well, or well enough. And it's a side comment to this. Just wanted to be, I just wanted to talk about it.
Okay.
Well, you pissed Bentley off and he went away, so I don't think. I think I like that idea. I think it brings it in the holacracy governance management to it. The issue is with holacracy is we don't have the technology to be able to actually implement it. We have these 1-hour conversations, and I think we already are doing what you suggest. Like, we're running with our own ideas, and I think we also have given each other a lot of permission to just, even if it's with TogetherTec, right? Even if it's with the Facebook group, our shared resources, do what you want, right? Try it if it's safe enough. Now, don't cancel the Facebook group, but whatever you wanted to try in there. The worst that happens is maybe we don't do that, right? Maybe we don't post about our individual projects more than other, we post them on here, and we do, we've figured out the conflict resolution feels like even the wrong word. It hasn't even developed a conflict, but that would work if we had other infrastructure and if TogetherTec was doing other things, right? Adriel doesn't need to come and ask for what we're doing with Wiki Election. He's just running with it. God knows I'm running with all of my stuff. But if it was TogetherTec specifically, I think if we could put it in writing, a certain amount of that is welcome and allowed, and then also but bring it to the next meeting, right? Hey, I iterated, I did the initiation, the iteration, and the resolution all on my own, but it's not in the meeting minutes, right? It's not there yet.
One specific thing about it is not about just going ahead and doing something and then reporting that, oh, I just allocated 50% of resources to buying something. And then everyone goes, it wasn't a good idea. It's something, it's more about, I want to do this because it's going public with the idea. I want to do this because I think it would be good to do this and this and this. And unless someone objects, I'm going to just do it. But first information and then execution. So this way it gives everyone a chance to voice concerns and possibly improve on the idea, or say that the idea is dumb and just don't do it.
I mean, the two sound like after being implemented, the end result would be extremely similar, right? Because like you'd still have to pitch it to council, you'd still have to have quorum, you'd still have to have all these things, but it's just sort of what the default setting is. It sounds like we're saying we're going to default to saying yes, but then all it takes is one person to say actually no, and then, oh, okay, no.
Also think we don't right now we don't have shared, like we don't have money that are resources, right? So no one's saying, hey, I'm gonna use this scarce resource in order to go and make a decision. Where instead our time is our scarce resource, and of course we're gonna choose where we spend that. If I'm making it, I'm gonna make a nuclear reactor. No, like no one should trust me to do that. If I was allocated those funds, that would be a disaster. So like there's a certain amount of like expertise that's involved, and also like, yeah, go run with it unless you need me, right? Like unless you need our shared resources, which when we have, you know what I mean? You're not spending my time and you're not spending our money. And so, yeah, run with it. And then if you're able to give us more time and resources, right? Like it's when we're giving each other homework, right? Or we're choosing a product and saying, and I need other people to come and be part of this, that we would both, if we had the software, that would be a great thing to do, because we'd have those shared resources. And let's say we have $10,000 there and someone has one idea that's going to cost 500, right? That becomes like I feel like the amount of resources that are in there, right? Like you can try and experiment with, let's say 1% of the pool, but you can't, whatever that percentage is, right? But not with 100% of the pool, not with 50% of the pool. The number of people involved is the number of people have to agree.
Sorry, but it still has to be approved. So it's not like you can just take the 1% or 50% or 100% and go off and do it and come back and say, sorry guys, I messed up. I just spent a lot of money. Peace, I'm out. Like you would still have to say, hey, people in the council, I want to go spend 10% of our resources on opening up a power plant. If we all agree, then we don't say anything. And if we don't agree, then we say, wait, hold up, and then voice our concerns, right?
Okay. Yeah. The silent approval of...
Is that correct? Because you like...
Yes. Yeah. I thought about something slightly different, but generally that's the idea. To first state the idea is, and I'm going to do this and this and allocate this many resources, and then the default is, yeah, go ahead, and objections happen like between the idea is voiced and the idea is executed. So yeah, it's just the idea goes through unless someone says something.
I mean, the wiki election side of me is kicking in, and I'm wondering if you err on the side of saying yes, and then if we're saying how people voted and you didn't vote yes, but you also didn't vote no, and the thing happens and doesn't do well, then that kind of, to me, in a way, gives council members, like, if the default is yes, unless you come up with a really good idea not to, or a good reason not to, then that seems to sort of give a reason for saying like, oh yeah, I voted for it, but I wasn't paying that close of attention, as opposed to if you vote yes for something, then you better know what you're doing because you just actually voted, as opposed to if you vote no, like it's, I guess, the assumption of moving forward versus the assumption of we're not going to do anything unless we all agree. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. I think that could be solved with something. Okay, a system that allows for the ideas to be like written up and presented, and some ideas that have bigger scope and need more time, resources, and everything, they are more visible than others. Something software that helps to see what ideas are potentially what ideas are bigger, what ideas need closer look and more attention from people who can say no in a meaningful way, and just from people who can actually stop the idea from being executed Yes.
I know this is taking us like weeks to go through this document, but I do find this process, even if we never get any, like this is a powerful process for us to talk about these things. And so the iterative process of the iteration process is actually the part that is, because it's like if I initiate an idea all on my own, and I don't know why that makes me mad. I'm initiate an idea on my own, and then I have an iteration. I'm saying I want permission to go with this iteration, and no one is. And how about you go with this iteration and this iteration and this iteration? Well, no, because it's my iteration, right? If we're doing the iteration, then all of those iterations and voting on the best one and doing pros and cons and deciding on the best and going through 75% makes sense. But if I'm coming with my iteration and somebody else is giving me that homework and being like, you need to iterate it in this way, that's somewhat where the conflict comes in, because they're not like, if it's just my resources, my time, then I get to choose anyway. And I'm just telling you what I'm doing with it. If it's our time or our resources that I'm using, but it's my vision, that's kind of where it's like, okay, well, if you're going to just say no, do you have a better option? Or no, your no might just be like, no, I'm not going to, I don't agree that 10% of our money is going to go there because I don't think it's a good return on investment. Like I will say that, go ahead, Radek.
So I was just going to say, it's a very good point about allocating someone else's time. I think the general idea here is that when an idea is presented, it should not require someone specific time to be allocated. So it's very different from the usual style of doing things. Like I am the boss, so I have this idea and I allocate you, and just all the team to do my idea because I think it's good. The difference is I have the idea, and if I need more people, I pitch the ideas and I present it in such a way that people want to come in and do the work because they think and they feel like it is a very good idea indeed, and they want to participate. So the idea can be executed and come to life.
I feel like there's something here that's fixing all of game B, because it's like this is what TogetherTec is, right? We all brought our projects to this, and we're working on our own because we're not able to work. Like there's something very powerful here, that this iteration. So I come to it with an idea, right? This is my baby. Here's where I'm willing for it to be changed, and here's where I'm not willing for it to be changed. Otherwise, it's not going to be my vision anymore. Someone else is like, well, actually, I would work on your project if it was X, Y, and not Z. And then it's up to us to somewhat negotiate what that iteration looks like that would bring in the most people that I'm, as the idea holder, would feel comfortable with. And I'm able to veto it at any point and be like, actually, no. And they're able to take it and run with it if I've kind of out-vetoed myself. That there's something here that kind of is like, can you present your idea well enough that people are coming on board to it, that you have enough people to make it viable? Because that's also part of it, right? If some idea needs 10 people to be viable, but you only have 2, it's not viable, right? And there's something here.
Yeah, it's like presenting, this is my idea, this is my baby, and obviously this is the most beautiful baby in the world. It's just convincing other people that it is indeed the most beautiful.
Babies.
Going
This
back
baby will be
to
much
something
cuter
you
if it
had
had her nose and not yours.
That's a perfectly reasonable thing to say, yeah. When you had said that, like, if you're spending your own time, and resources and stuff like that, is that under the TogetherTec umbrella, or is that under like your own project umbrella?
So yeah, I've been out of this for a while, so I apologize, but yeah, I think this deciding process is just for the shared resources listed. So this isn't even like, this doesn't have anything to do with ideas and stuff like that. I mean, we need to talk about all that, but this document is just about those shared resources.
I just wanted to make a side comment to this, and not meant to take 20 minutes of our time to discuss it. So yeah, definitely.
Like I said, I think that this is taking weeks is actually very powerful, because yes, this is
I
not
would love
like
to see something of this level with like the Brett Weinsteins and like get in the weeds super like, because this is about as in the weeds as you can get. Actually trying to build a foundational document for like what kind of organization would actually work for all of us. But one of the things to think about, what if we're saying that the whole point of all this is how we manage our assets, one of the things that's not an asset here, which technically is in like the business world, is the brand. Is the, when people think of TogetherTec, what do they think of? Which I'm sure when I say that, a bunch of people are like, that sounds like Game A. Sort of yes, but mostly no.
TogetherTec brand should go under assets. I think you're right. I think that makes total sense.
Yeah, I thought we put that there last time, but I guess it didn't get transferred over.
Yeah, it's like Game B. The brand of Game B is very nebulous and chaotic, and no one can kind of co-opt it because it's like that. It's like, I can't come and be like, I can tell you I know how to make Game B, but I know that, you know what I mean? That's not quite the same as, no, this is the only Game B that can exist. And it's like, if you're working as TogetherTec, that's under the brand TogetherTec. But no, like Wiki Election and Reason Score and Solution Raising isn't under TogetherTec, even though it is, right? Like, it can fuck up and not show negatively on the brand on TogetherTec.
Yeah. And as we get more projects, guaranteed some of them will fuck up. Like that's...
I hope so.
Yeah, exactly. Because otherwise, what are we even doing?
Exactly.
But I guess so to tie that back to the earlier statement of like, if you're trying to do something under the TogetherTec brand and you're using your own time, your own resources, your own this, I think that still gets voted on, at least to start with, because you're doing it under the brand. So the question is, does that fit under the TogetherTec brand, or can you go off on your own and do it as your own project, right? Like, I'm not going to ask the group what to do with Wiki Election or Conferati, because those are my projects. If I wanted to pitch something new and you guys are like, that doesn't sound like TogetherTec, I can either drop it or start up another project of my own that's not under TogetherTec. So it could be a project, but it's not under the TogetherTec brand. So I think that's something to consider. And then over time, we'll have to start to come up with some sort of, I don't know, milestones or things to watch out for, where we're like, okay, it's time to change this. We're getting really top heavy. We have to meet about everything. Maybe it's time to start, identifying like, okay, you don't have to ask about these things, or you just have to ask a certain person or a certain group.
I don't know how to put it in writing, but I feel like what we, like Raymond says, to do what we're already doing. And we already are both, I feel permission to run with ideas and then bring it and be like, by the way, this is what I did. And with the, if that ever happens, there's also the, maybe you shouldn't have done that, right? Like, it works both ways, both to feel like you have permission to try things, which means they might go wrong and you might, well, next time we're not going to have it go that way. And because the other option is, of course, if we have to run everything through here, I have an idea on a Saturday and then we're not meeting until next Friday. And it's like, well, I like to run with things right away. That there's like, I think we are giving each other permission to try things, especially since there aren't monetary shared assets yet. That is a way that we could maybe play with this, is we don't yet have monetary resources, and we're not going to necessarily have them anytime soon. But if we were like, hey, how about we each put $10 a month into a pool? That would be a proposal. And then someone's iterations like, actually, I only want to put $10 in every quarter. Or actually, I want to put $20 in. That is an actual, and then it would be like how to spend those funds when they're there. That part of this is we don't have the assets. So getting to that point would need to go through this process. I don't know if I'm really explaining what I'm trying to explain in my head. It's coming out right. But
like anything that's going to be generating assets to add to this list is going to have to go through the proposal system.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, that might be one. I was thinking it might be like, although once we're ready to get resources, it's going to have to go through this, but also going through like a play version of that, right? Like I would be like, I had this great idea. Everyone involved in TogetherTec is going to put $50 a month towards it. I've initiated between this and next time, right? And I come and you're like, well, wait, no, that's my $50. You're willing to put yours in. Okay, so, and then then it starts being the iterative process, right? Where it's like, how about not 50? How about not once a month? How about not till we reach this threshold, right? That there's still that, yeah, this is something we'll have to go through, and it's something sooner rather than later that will. Yeah.
I mean, when I think about proposals, I kind of think of it a bit like legislation, where outside of actually voting on it and having a session, you can work with either you can work on your own, or you can go and work with others to like author a bill and then get sponsors, and then once you have all of the required things, you pitch it to everyone else. I think like I'm not saying that we need to be that hard and fast about it, but the basic idea of like when you bring it to council with the intention of let's vote on this, that's kind of, you're technically starting at initiation. If you just did a killer job and you had all your ducks in a row and every single thing was done, and we all look at the proposal and say that's great, let's do it, you could skip over iteration. That wouldn't normally happen, I wouldn't think, but that theoretically could happen. But you could just say in a session, hey, I have an idea, how about this? That could be an initiation. It could just be pitching an idea in this meeting and then we can talk about it at a certain point, or I guess we actually only document it at the resolution, so that's fine, because then you can talk about it. If it falls away, fine. If somebody wants to keep working on it, because like that sort of sparked an idea and it didn't quite get approved in the meeting, but like, oh, okay, yeah, if it seemed to jive with both me and Radek, then we can meet either, talk about it during it. Most likely we'd meet afterwards, have our own discussion, build it out, hopefully build some kind of specs or a proposal around it, and then eventually officially come to the board and say, hey, here's this idea that we've been working on. What does everyone think? Does that make sense?
It strikes me as something very important to compare proposals to legislation. I don't
Only
know
like the most basic level. I do want to make sure that it doesn't emulate legislation too exactly, because we know there's a ton of issues there. But the basic idea of it sort of being, you got a bunch of work done beforehand to try to make it sort of passable on the first round. And when things get bigger, you may even end up with things like sponsorship, where it's like, oh, okay, before you spend 20 minutes of everyone's time in a board meeting talking about it, find one other council member to talk about it and get buy-in, and then cool, we'll talk about it. And I'm not saying that we do that yet, because there's 4 of us. But if there ends up being 15 or 20 of us, probably good to have some sort of a, no, you can't all just throw any ideas whenever. You have to have it at least X level, and you have to have one other person sign on for it before we spend people's time. And again, that's down the road, which will end up, I think, with all of this, it's going to be a very different battle to sort of have a council and have a board with 4 people versus 10 or 20.
Yeah.
And also, do we want a max size for board? Because I mean, if we bring on every project and every this, like theoretically, you could end up with a board of like 100 people. That seems unwieldy.
No.
Or I guess we can cross that bridge when we come to it.
The Roman army was organized in like 10, 100, and it was a very the structure was I think designed to actually counter the unwillingness of tons of people doing
Now, was
this.
that still fairly top down? Like, was it,
Yeah.
the top 10 give instructions to, to their underlings, and then those people give instructions to their 100, and those people give instructions to their 1,000? Or were, a certain group, if you have a unit of 100, you're your own unit, go and do your own thing? I assume it's the first, because it's the army.
Now we have the technology to make something much more smarter, and obviously small units of just a few people who can quickly work together on one specific thing as the future, and then connecting the small units into one bigger whole with a software system, obviously. This is what we can do, and this is also the future. It's a fractal DAO thing again. Yes.
Which army are you talking about, Radek?
The Roman army.
The Roman army, like
the back then, yes, ancient times.
You're like technology, and I was like, wait, who has technology?
I don't know. It's I don't know why I thought about the Roman army, but what I thought about was this small units that have, each unit has one person who goes up the command chain and form a unit that is high level up on the yeah. Sorry. But back to the original thought, creating a proposal is as creating kind of a law, and I don't know why it seems important. Maybe it's because it has certain weight and not process, but
I mean, I think in a way with legislation, it kind of, I think, has the opposite effect, because in legislation, like, something is legal unless it's not, right? It's not like who said you could do that. That's not how laws work. We pass laws to say you can't do that. Okay, now you can't. Everything else is still open. The board is kind of the reverse, where we're saying, hey, here's our vision, here's our mission, here's all this stuff. Everything should be going in this direction. We want to catalog as much in sort of both directions. In theory, if it's not stated, then it's kind of not allowed, or unless, like, if the current documentation or procedures or whatever, if they cover it, then you follow what they say. Things get murky if there's no rule surrounding it, and then you would try to use the mission and vision to say, like, oh, okay, what choice could we make here in alignment with our mission and vision?
Okay.
Does that
that
make sense with sort of what your concerns were, or is it something totally different?
No, I'm not concerned. I'm just...
Or like there's something sounds important there in that connection of...
I mean, what you said is, of course, totally true. It's just... I don't know what I'm thinking about, totally. But it's something very philosophical, I think, and that's why I cannot...
I get it. I get those same things where I'm like, there's something here. There's something that my brain is like, pay attention. Usually it's because there's a problem, but it can't identify what it is yet. And they're like, keep thinking, because there's something in there that, like...
There's something that's coming up for me, and I don't know if it'll help or hinder, so feel free to throw it away. But there's something like we talked about, that we have our own projects, and then and then there's the TogetherTec umbrella. There's also like our own individual lives and whatever we're creating. Like, how I don't want anything that's a hierarchy over my life, right? And I think there's something in like an iteration and initiation process that's like this, whether it's whether we state what you can do and you can't do anything else, or we state what you can't do and you can do everything else, is somewhat in that same realm of like, we have laws, you can't murder each other, you have to, but outside of that, everything that's not explicit should be allowed, right? Like, it's like all of the Libby, and as a neurodiverse person in a very neurotypical world, is like, wait, why do you, like, that's common sense, and everyone should just know this. There should be nothing that sits in that realm, because we're not all able to sit in that realm, but have permission to play and have permission to use the resources, have permission to initiate and iterate and even resolve in your own life and in your own projects. But then we also have a process of like, oops, that went wrong. Oops, actually, we don't like people to come around, and like, there's something in that.
The realm is the magic word here. Laws and proposals are ways to map the territory on which we exist, kind of. That's the proposal. Is like, in strategy games, you have the fog of war kind of thing, that you just discover the territory by sending your troops or whatever to go in a direction and then discover stuff. And proposals seem kind of similar. You define and describe a piece of reality that you want to happen. And okay, this is philosophical thing, but there's something to it, definitely.
I mean, to be fair, I think this entire thing is kind of philosophical.
Yes.
Yes, because I was thinking, like, when you mentioned the example of the nuclear reactor, right? And it's like, okay, I'm the person who wants to create a nuclear reactor, and I want it to be in Vancouver because it's where I live, and I want to be the one running it. That's very different than someone comes up with the iteration process. It's like, actually, I think it should be in Toronto. You just messed up everything, right? Like, it's like, why? Because I'm in Toronto and I want to do it. Well, that's like that. There's the initiation iteration process. Is the iteration, the person who brings the initiation has a reason for initiating that, and the iterations can support that I could iterate all day. Bring me in a fully formed idea, and I'll give you a million different iterations for it, as well as what could go wrong with them. And that's not helpful most of the time, right? Like, it's not helpful unless it is. To say, hey, what, like, the location is an iteration, right? The amount of money, who's in charge of that nuclear plant is an iteration. How much output it's putting in, why we're even doing it. All of their forms of iteration. There's the initiation, the iteration, and the resolution is like, right, and we're giving you an okay to go build it. Does it need to go through the process, or can I just go and build one unless no one says no? With a nuclear plant, I feel like I want people to say no. With you know what I mean? I want to run this ad campaign, or I want this. It's like, go try it until it, especially when we don't have those shared resources.
Right, which I think the whole like go and try it and do this, that might end up being a part of like kind of a regular part of the initiation and iteration is like, that sounds interesting. We don't know enough yet. What can we test to learn more so that with this, with the main proposal, we aren't sure. So let's have like a sub-proposal where we test things out and learn more and then say, okay, great. We just learned this. We just learned that we don't want a reactor here, or we do. And I do think when it comes to the iteration, things like, I want it here because I live here, that would be a reason for you to vote, but for no one else. And if everyone only wants it for themselves, that's where things fall apart quickly, which they should at that point. Because if your only reason to have it in Vancouver is because you want it to be close and someone else wants it in Toronto because it's close to them, that's equal. Because for the
Except
group,
that I'm the one who brought the proposal, right? So I'm the one who's like,
I think it matters even a little bit. To the overall group. If you want to do it yourself outside of TogetherTec, no one's stopping you.
Yeah. But that is so if I'm like right now while I'm creating the meta learning magic, there's part of me that's like, okay, this needs to work for everyone. I'm like, fuck that. No, it doesn't. It has to work for me because I'm the main person here. I'm the one who has the idea. I know where this is going. If it doesn't work for me, it doesn't work for anyone. If someone else was like, actually, I think we should do X, Y, and Z because that'll work for me, I actually trump them in that because it needs to work for me. And that's what, like, if I'm the one who's creating the nuclear power plant, there's a reason because I'm the nuclear power expert. Right. You're saying you're voting to move me to Toronto is what I'm saying. So because I'm the one who's going to be running the nuclear plant. Now, if someone else is like, I live in Toronto, I could run it. That's a different story. But like, it's my life you're voting on. So yeah, you might want it in Toronto because you don't want it in Vancouver because you don't want it in your backyard.
Sorry, to be clear, we're never voting on someone's life. We're voting on a project. If you choose to participate, and we might take, we might weigh into consideration, where do all of our experts live? Who's willing to move? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, here are the sites that we've set our potential. Now let's talk about the pros and cons for each and da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
But I think, and this sounds like an important distinction, is if it's something like that's yours and you want to have full control over it, it's your project. And then yes, absolutely. Like I think that for the most part, I'm skeptical about the whole crowd run things. I think no matter what, we have to end up there. I just don't think that we've seen a really good world-class version of it yet. And we're going to need a bunch of iterations of that. And so that's one of the things that TogetherTec is testing, is that group decision-making, as many of us have to buy in as possible, et cetera. But if you're an expert and you want to go and do it yourself, that becomes a project like Reason Score or WikiLection or whatever, where you own it. It's yours. You run it. And personally, that's how I think those projects will be more successful until we get the group thing absolutely nailed down.
Yeah, that is like literally the meat of what we are discussing right now. Right. Is like this, because there's always the flip side of like, okay, if I like TogetherTec, the name anyway, was my baby, and then now it's our baby. And when I come up with a new idea, I don't have it necessarily under the TogetherTec umbrella. It's side. Part of that is because I don't know if it's allowed here, right? Like there's a certain amount of like, okay, it's my solution racing, it's my project. I would love other people to run with it, but they're not. So like, how do I create this? What am I trying to get to here? I don't know. It went away.
Sounds like the question is, how and when does a project transition from being yours to being like sort of a group?
Right. I remembered it unevaporated. So it's, if as an individual, I can create as a loner, and I would love to create as a group. The group part is harder But because I can't do that yet, everything becomes a solo project starting from scratch, right? Like it's like, ooh, and I think this is the crux of the game be way too many projects and not enough people. It's like everyone kind of wants to start from scratch and everyone wants to have their ideas iterated and and so it's partly having this process of, hey, you can run with it. And we'll just like later on, we might take you out of TogetherTec, but otherwise, like giving people permission to be individuals, work with what they can, and you can't really fuck it up because we're allowing you to have that. So the worst you can do is fuck up to the point we need a new rule, right? Which is like you didn't break it because it wasn't there before. Like, it's so allowing that process.
Going back to like the overall mission and vision, things like building a reactor, from what I understand, that would be a project. And if it like that will be a project outside of TogetherTec that one or a group of people owns, but that's their project. And then if we say, hey, does that meet our criteria, to be a project that has long-term benefits to most beings, if it passes that, great, come on board. We don't own your project. We're just going to offer you resources to help you get it to where it needs to be. And then in a later state, when we've got a bunch of people and possibly some resources, then we can talk about a small pivot where it's like, hey, should we look at owning some of these? Because some of these, like for something like WikiElection, I don't want to own that forever. If it takes off, I want like a group thing to own it. I just want to make sure that it's run properly. And I think a lot of projects are probably like that, where you don't want to be the linchpin for the entire time it exists, and what happens after you die and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and we have to deal with WikiElection 10 years from now. And I don't mean WikiElection 10 years from now. I mean whatever 10 years from now is equivalent of WikiElection is. Because if the new Adriel has to hold it and take that risk, that's the problem that we need to solve. Is like you're both taking the risk and taking the reins and doing all of that. Whereas if we have a way that anyone with a new idea can get a group of people together, get funding if it's a good enough idea together, then no, you don't hold it from day one, but you might be able to run with it, right? You might be able to, sorry, Radek.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, this touches on a very, I don't think we discussed one point here. The question is, at what point, where is the point where a project that is mine becomes shared, and what gives other people who joined the right to vote no on how I see the direction of the project should be. I start, for example, one idea. I put in a proposal and it passes and people join me. So what gives, when people start getting the right to say to the original author of the project that the direction is wrong, and then that the project needs to steer in like another direction.
Honestly,
the transition of ownership is the question.
When you sell it. Like the whole idea is that TogetherTec, at least for the next 10 years probably, is operating in a game A world and operates based on all the laws as they exist, which there's ownership, like there's laws around a lot of the stuff. So I think the idea is TogetherTec starts off just being a community to sort of help these projects to take off. At a certain point, the goal is for it to start to get its own resources. Once that happens, at a certain point, it will want to actually start being able to buy things. Right? Like if you put in a bunch of your own time and effort and you build out hyper logos to the point where, it's great, it's working, people are using it, you as the project owner technically have the option to either keep it for yourself, sell it to a game A company, or sell it to a game B company. And there's probably some other ones I'm missing, but that's the basic idea. If you sell it to a game A company, they own it, it's not yours anymore. That's how things work.
I think there's a much more nebulous in between way that we'll probably end up going for, because that's very obvious, right? We sold it. It's now TogetherTec. When WikiElection is bought by TogetherTec, that will be obvious. But there's also a more nebulous, like, okay, people are on board with WikiElection. It's not just Adriel. So Adriel gets to decide how to let people in on that, right? How to be like, how are we making this go? And TogetherTec can have the software, the hardware to allow for that process of like, hey, these people are doing this, right? And these people are decision makers, and that there does need to be an obvious process. Not just, like when you're dating someone and you're like, are we exclusive? Like an actual conversation of like, who's on this, because I don't think TogetherTec should own and operate WikiLection at any point if that doesn't work. Whereas if we bought it, yes,
Right.
but like I might have a voting share on WikiLection and be part of that and not be it of TogetherTec or vice versa, right? TogetherTec doesn't necessarily, WikiLection might need its own governance. And then TogetherTec can vote whether or not they own it.
That's quite possible. But I think that would be similar to like, a multinational conglomerate today, where they just own a bunch of things. And in the current model, it's entirely for profit. That's what would be changing. But the idea is, for the most part, the conglomerates leave those organizations with their own governance, their own boards, all that stuff. So there's still like people making decisions for that organization, but they report to sort of the higher group. I think I did leave out what I think is a likely in-between step between the like just helping people move forward and then buying things, which is having forms of like certifications, where as we work with the community to be like, hey, what does it mean for a company to be trustworthy? Or what do you need to, trust like a manufacturer, or any of the things that the community starts to say, hey, let's figure out, easily which companies are in alignment by having a form of certification, kind of like the organic one, right?
I think this conversation in particular, like what happened, like the conglomerate in game A and game B, isn't helpful right now because we don't know which one of, like, we don't know whether it's going to be a conglomerate and it's going to be under it, whether we're going to buy them, whether we're going to do that process. We each have our vision of what that might look like in the future, True. But what we're dealing with is right now. And so I think if we want to bring it back for the last 10 minutes to our stewarded assets of the website, of Facebook, of the brand, we're going through this iteration process. Are we good with the iteration process? When somebody wants to do something with one of those assets, are we okay? They can iterate and do that on their own, and we'll resolve it and record it when 75% of us say yes, and we'll be bringing them to this board meeting because that's our current technology. And we do give each other permission to make mistakes until there's a firm rule not to. So if you do have an idea tomorrow morning you want to implement between now and next Friday, go ahead. We will like break this before we make it, and that's fine, right? Like to be like, well, wait, I know we gave you permission, but you just messed it all up, right? That like
I like that with the added, I mean, to me obvious, but it has to fulfill the mission and vision. Like if you feel that you can argue that whatever you're like, you want to make a change to the Facebook group or a post, or do something with any of the resources, if it isn't in alignment with those two, hard no.
Right, and that might be what comes up when you make a mistake. And we come up and be like, actually, that thing you posted was not OmniWin, it was not anti-Rob,
even if it's not
a benefit of all beings.
Even if it technically works as designed, though, if it doesn't meet those, it's still kind of a mistake. Like it worked, but you still shouldn't have done it because it didn't align with the mission and vision.
Yeah, and I think those are important conversations we will have on but every post on our Facebook page is not. You know what I mean? Like other people post as well, but we are the admins, so maybe we are seen as more of
right.
like the
other people
brand.
Posting in theory are a part of that group, right? So those are kind of, we don't have customers, but kind of our customers or our users or our audience or however you want to say it. So that's those people. So for us posting as TogetherTec, everything should be sort of going towards our mission and vision and all those projects. So like if you come with a project like, hey, let's build a reactor, we look at this and say, I'm not sure how that, we'll have your project for TogetherTec because that itself doesn't help do this. If that project is going to have long-term benefits to most beings, that might be a project that we help support. But sort of phase one of TogetherTec is just us, hopefully providing some form of guidance and sort of a community, and then at some future point in time, if we get a big enough audience and start to actually gain some monetary assets, then we can start to about, great, now what do we do with it? And that's a conversation for future us, once we have those resources and stuff like that.
I like the idea of having a rule against making mistakes. Just wanted to say this.
No mistakes, you're out. You're out. First mistake,
not allowed
done.
to make mistakes.
My iteration's the exact opposite of that. If you haven't made several mistakes, by the time you've been here for 6 months, you're out.
Oh, yeah.
Because we haven't
A
learned
mistake quota.
anything from you. We wanted to learn from your mistakes, and you didn't make any, so useless.
Exactly. Can you go down, Adro? And we'll do just reread for the proposal, that part. Okay. So proposals are initiated when at least 2 people are present in a board meeting. Proposals are iterated when at least 2 people are present in a board meeting. That's good too, because even if 2 of us just show up, we can just have a conversation and, do what we do, which is create game B in a very ethereal way instead of actually concretely as we're doing next, as we're working on our projects, which are very concrete. At least 75% of PCIC holders must be present to come to a consensus on a resolution with no holders blocking, which is basically you can go with it unless someone says no, in all honesty. It's like, but we're going to actually vote. So like someone can block it. Be like, no, I don't want. I'm always voting nuclear power plants down, just so we're clear. It's never happening unless they're the other kind. This part underneath this jurisdiction dispute resolution, the whole time this has been here with these other names. I don't know whether who added those in, whether they were just there already.
I think they're part of the template.
Okay, so I don't looking out, they were just there. Initial team accountability. I mean, I think that having a dispute, not that we're going to get into this right now with 4 minutes left, but a dispute resolution is important. And I think even just putting in, we understand disputes are going to happen. We will need a resolution. And I think it kind of we need a dispute to be able to resolve first, to say, hey,
sorry, to be clear, this mentions external jurisdiction. So I think when I read that, I think of it more like, where are we going to incorporate? That's a part of that conversation, because that's if we're sued or we sue someone, where does that lawsuit happen? Right. And if we end up having some sort of an agreement that people sign.
Okay, gotcha. So if Wiki Election comes on board, we have them sign, hey, we're going to do arbitration instead of going through
in this. Yeah, that's my understanding, but it might mean something different. But that because this is still a game B organization operating in a game A world, and even outside of game A, just how our governments work, which are still kind of game A, but still, that's what I think it means, and that does seem important for us because. Already in this call, we've got 3 countries. Yep. And in the group overall, we have a ton of countries. And so then the question is how does that work? And it might just end up being, it's based where it's based, and each project has its own thing. And this might not actually be an issue until we have agreements to sign, until there is something like you're joining up, because right now it seems all very informal. I'm not sure that we really need to do that, but that's almost certainly something that Raymond should.
The fact we're global will work to our advantage in that, because I think it's actually really important that we put in there that any kind of that it has to be some sort of internal system and not external, because if we are going to sue each other, whose court and with what and how? No, you agreed to be part of this. If the tension is between our 2 projects or between we're going to do not consensus, whatever I just said before that, the arbitration, and have our own internal process. And then we have documents that people have signed. Therefore, you can't say, actually, I think I will be better under the court in the United States or under the court in New Zealand, and I'm going to sue you under there. You still can, because we can't undo the law, right? We can't. If we did something egregious, they can still do that. But they've signed documents saying, for something little, no, you can't go and sue us. Sorry. Yeah. You've signed these.
Or even for something big, it's at least an arrow in the quiver on. Well, you also decided to do this and you skipped that step. It's not to say that the arbitration would have been successful, but at the very least start there. And it's to your point, it's never bulletproof. You can still get around things that you've signed. A waiver doesn't just mean that you can throw all of your security standards out the window. You're still expected to make it be safe, and you can still be sued even if you have waivers. Yeah. Same basic idea.
All right, down to the last couple minutes. Radic looked like he had something he wanted to add, and then we'll close this and continue next week, hopefully with Bentley.
This 2 things: internal disputes, the low weight disputes, to be resolved within our power to solve, and then there is all those external interfaces to actual law systems and jurisdictions and how to, if we are not able to solve our own problems within TogetherTec, where do we go? To what external authority we consider to be, we choose to obey, like both parties that are involved in a dispute, they would need to agree under which jurisdiction they are going to be told what the resolution actually is.
And that is, it's hard because we're internal, external, we're trying to become like it's going to be difficult to figure that because we want a third party probably to do it, but there is no third party, and yet there always needs to be. So it's almost like a jury of your peers. It's almost like we need to have like a jury of other business, like project holders, and for both parties to vote and say, yes, I'm okay with that person. I think they'll be impartial. And what that, like on our four, we can't do that, right? Like two of us are siblings, no badly, like, I mean, you know, we're working on different projects together, but I think we would, right now, we could do a third party, right? We could have somebody outside of this, but in game B do it. But eventually that becomes, and so this is going to be an important conversation, which we can continue next time, of course. Do we want to invite Raymond to the next one, or do we think we need another one to kind of talk about this jurisdiction resolution or accountabilities?
Another one.
I think so too. And then he can come and kind of help us clean this part up.
Yeah.
These last three when we kind of work through.
Yeah. I think it's also worth noting that, like, I don't think the jurisdiction part really comes into play until we actually have things signed. Because until then, like, somebody in New Zealand could try and sue me and I can just be like, no. And then what are they going to do? I'm not in New Zealand. I don't have an organizational entity there.
Yeah, and that's where just having those conversations, because it doesn't matter if WikiElection gets sued. That's not Reason Score suing WikiElection or Wiki. You know what I mean? Like, there's a big difference. And with how much we are interweaving our projects, right? If like WikiElection makes you a billionaire and Bentley, you know what I mean, has helped, but Reason Score doesn't go anywhere. There, all of those things could come up, and part of it is kind of creating the prenuptial before we're in love instead of waiting till the resolution, right? Like doing that. And so anyway, so no Raymond next week, just so I have this for when I rewatch it next time. No Raymond next week. We're going to do this one more week. We're here tomorrow for our roundtables. And otherwise we'll sit with this jurisdiction dispute resolution. Ideas will percolate in all of our brains, and we'll talk about this for one more week. All right. Goodbye, YouTube and Facebook.